It's been about a year now since our 2-week quarantine has started. All around the world, countries all reacted differently. And today I want to look at some of the similarities and differences of these reactions so that we can make sort of like a perfect pandemic policy or something. Take all the things we like from different countries' responses and smush them together. As of filming this video, United States, India, and Brazil are the top 3 countries with the highest cases of the virus, while the 3 countries at the bottom of this list are Micronesia, Samoa, and Vanuatu. Of course, population does play a factor in this, but we can also look at how their responses attributed to helped impact case number as well. An overview of some of the common responses sort of looked like this. Schools and universities were shut down. Places for public gatherings like restaurants or concerts were canceled or postponed. Many jobs went remote. People were only allowed outside of their homes for emergencies or getting groceries. And hotlines were set up in order to answer questions about the virus or track contact with the virus. Countries that had responses like this were the United States, the UK, Indonesia, Nepal, Italy, Ghana, and the Philippines. There were many countries that required quarantine upon returning to a home country while traveling. So a lot of governments would provide rooms in 5-star hotels for people to quarantine in. These quarantines were typically about 14 days long. France would fine people who would leave their homes without any legal pass to do so. The fines could range from about 130 euros to about 3,750 euros. In South Africa, funerals were still allowed, unlike in the United States. Meanwhile, in India, they set up a color coding system for each district, each color, green, red, or orange, indicating the intensity of the virus within that area. In South Korea, they even created a whole committee dedicated to combating fake news, in charge of checking misinformation or mistranslation from news from China or the United States. In Turkey, all schools shut down. The government of Turkey recognized that some students were going home to places where they may not be taken as well care of as when they were in school. So the government gave grants to different school programs to keep up activities for the children around the country. They would happen in small gatherings, and intense cleaning happened in between sessions. This was in order to help the mental health of the students. They also provided nutrition access, financial aid to families who needed assistance. In Costa Rica, they had daily press conferences in order to keep the general public up to date with any virus information. Some countries were fortunate to have early openings. Last year in June, for example, Ireland was able to open up a lot of their public services and non-essential businesses, like museums, restaurants, clubs, and so on. They seem to be able to keep this number relatively low, even easing up things further around Christmas time. But unfortunately, they reaped the repercussions of that in January. Vietnam was another country that was able to open up their country early. They opened it up as early as April of last year, and have fortunately been able to keep their numbers low. It was around this time that the government also encouraged a campaign called, I forget what the campaign's called. Whatever. The Vietnamese government started a campaign that promoted domestic tourism. And in some places like Sweden, they didn't even close any of their schools or universities. Their main response was to just keep vulnerable populations, like older people or people who are more at risk, at home, and tracking people who contracted the virus. Something that surprised me a lot while researching from this video was finding out that Greenland had a total of 31 cases but 0 deaths. So how did they achieve this? Greenland completely cut off their borders. They had very strict border policies. They also designated spots that were considered open places or vulnerable places. People who were quarantining were allowed to return to open places, whereas they were restricted from going to vulnerable places. Greenland took the virus very seriously due to the lack of ICU and ventilators that they have inside of the country. They only have 4 ICUs available in their capital, and that includes 4 ventilators as well. One of the other reasons that they were so strict with the virus is because in most places in Greenland, their only access to a close hospital is by helicopter. So due to the lack of access to healthcare within the country to fight off this specific virus, the government took this threat very seriously. Greenland, along with the Pacific Islands, who are all at the bottom of the list of countries with the lowest cases, they used low fund responses, like washing hands and promoting wearing masks. In places like Vietnam, they were especially focused on keeping their message consistent and constant. Wash your hands, wear a mask. Back in April 2020, Harvard published a paper that they titled A Pandemic Roadmap. This referenced past government responses to threats like war and applied it to preparing for a pandemic. They suggested 3 simple steps: warning, testing, and tracking the virus, providing job security, access to resources, and healthcare, and providing these resources undiscriminatorily and ethically. The rest of the paper outlines the peripheral resources and programs that would need to successfully carry out this roadmap. So now that we've looked at a bunch of different countries' reactions to the virus, as well as an academic paper for how they suggest to combat it, let's create the perfect pandemic response plan. Wash your hands and wear a mask. Just kidding. Just some of the ideas that I found from my own home country, as well as countries around the world, and I just kind of smushed it together.
The perfect pandemic response includes clear, consistent messaging like washing your hands and wearing a mask, a strict lockdown, closing schools and public gatherings, creating a hotline for questions and tracking virus contact, paying hotel arrangements for returning residents, job security and access to health care, indicating zones and districts where the virus is intense versus where it isn't, a committee for combating fake news, programs that promote the mental well-being for children and young adults, holding daily press conferences to give adequate virus information, promoting domestic tourism if the virus isn't too bad in certain areas, using the GPS in people's smartphones to track where they are if they have contracted the virus, and finding people who have not followed proper lockdown procedures.
People may argue that a lot of these steps are very restrictive, but if we learned anything from this pandemic, it's that everybody's going to react differently to it. And the one thing that I definitely take away from this is sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. All of my resources are in the description below. Thank you for watching.